Tan Cam rose early from her fitful sleep to visit Thi Thi. It was a morning where the ancient proverb rang true: for the sorrowful soul, no scenery can ever be joyful. Outside, the sky was a bruised, oppressive gray, a thick shroud of gloom that perfectly mirrored the leaden despair weighing heavy in her chest. As she crossed the threshold of her home, her cat, Hac Bao, refused to be left behind, pacing restlessly and meowing with an eerie persistence until she finally relented, placing the animal into her woven carrying basket. She thought to herself that perhaps bringing the cat along was for the best, seeing her beloved pet might provide Thi Thi with some small, flickering spark of comfort in these dark times. The taxi lurched to a halt in front of Thi Thi's residence. At the sound of the doorbell, a maid promptly appeared to pull back the heavy doors. Upon catching sight of Tan Cam, the woman whispered urgently, "You have arrived at the perfect moment. The young mistress is not well today. She did not sleep for a single second last night." It was truly strange, unsettling even. After handing the empty basket to the maid, Tan Cam cradled Hac Bao firmly in her arms and headed straight for Thi Thi's private chambers. The entire room was entombed in a suffocating darkness. The curtains were drawn tight against the world, and not a single light had been switched on. Stepping inside was like walking into a stagnant tomb, the air thick and heavy. A sharp furrow formed on Tan Cam's brow. Through the gloom, she could just barely discern a motionless silhouette perched upon the sofa. She knew instinctively that it was Thi Thi. She moved toward the window, intending to pull back the drapes and let in some life, but Thi Thi spoke in a voice drained of all vitality, "Don't open them. I don't want to see the sunlight." Tan Cam froze, letting the fabric go. She walked toward Thi Thi and sat in the chair directly opposite her. Thi Thi was smoking, and the air was choked with swirling, gray clouds of acrid tobacco. As Tan Cam's eyes adjusted to the dimness, she saw the glistening tracks of dried tears on Thi Thi's cheeks. Her lipstick had been scrubbed away, and the dark, swollen hollows beneath her eyes were proof enough that she had spent the entire night wide awake in the dark. Thi Thi remained silent, and Tan Cam did not press her. Having been best friends for so many years, she understood the labyrinth of Thi Thi's emotions all too well. She knew that any words of comfort offered now would be hollow and useless. A profound sense of defeat washed over her. But the terrifying question remained: what exactly was it that had defeated them? How could they ever accept this nightmare? One friend dead in a sudden, horrific manner, and another driven into the abyss of madness. It was incomprehensible. Tan Cam reached out and took Thi Thi's left hand, but she recoiled inwardly at the touch. The flesh was bone-chillingly cold. Thi Thi. Why is the air conditioning so high? It's freezing in here. Thi Thi exhaled a long, shaky sigh. Perhaps it is only the coldness within my own heart. Why has this sudden catastrophe fallen upon us? It's strange. Honestly, today my back feels so frigid, as if a heavy block of ice has been placed right against my spine. It was only then that Tan Cam noticed Thi Thi was still wearing that same cheongsam. In the spectral, low light of the room, the silk fabric seemed to emit a faint, unnatural shimmer. "Cam. You haven't seen the state on Kayazin since she went mad, have you? She keeps clutching her own hair and pulling it upward, as if some invisible force is trying to hang her by her scalp. She screams Lam Kai's name over and over, babbling that Lam Kai wants to borrow her eyes. It's terrifying." As she finished speaking, Thi Thi broke down, a sob racking her body as she collapsed into Tan Cam's lap. Trembling violently, she whimpered, "Cam, I am so truly terrified. I don't know why, but I have this sickening feeling that the next one to meet a disaster will be me. I'm so scared." "What are you talking about? Don't say such nonsense. Why would you be next? Lam Kai committed suicide, surely you don't intend to follow her path? It's not that. Don't forget, Cam, I've always had a very sharp sixth sense. Since I was a child, I could feel things before they happened. That's why we were always so close, remember? I can truly feel it in my soul.
The next one will be me. Tan Cam's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and dread.
Lam Kai was dead, On Kai was insane, and now Thi Thi was showing these disturbing signs of instability.
Why bring up that sixth sense now?
Tan Cam wanted to scream at the heavens, cursing the fate that forced her to endure such unrelenting agony. Duong Thi Thi continued to wail, her spirit crushed under the immense weight of the recent tragedies. Tan Cam could do nothing but rhythmically pat her friend's shoulder in a desperate attempt to offer comfort. She wanted to wail along with her, but she knew that if she collapsed now, there would be no one left to protect Thi Thi. Thi Thi leaned her weight slowly against her friend. At that exact moment, Hac Bao, who had been resting quietly in Tan Cam's lap, suddenly bolted upright, his entire body tensing.
Hac Bao! Tan Cam hissed. But the cat was glaring at Thi Thi with a look of pure, unadulterated malice.
A low, guttural growl vibrated in his throat, a warning. He looked as though he were trying to shield Tan Cam from something monstrous.
Tan Cam leaned down to soothe the cat, thinking he was just being temperamental. She pulled him close, whispering softly, "What is it, Hac Bao? Why are you so angry? You aren't allowed to snap at people like that, you know?"
She tried to force a small, reassuring smile to calm the cat, but mid-gesture, her entire body went rigid.
She had seen something. Something impossible.
Reflected in Hac Bao's eyes. Hac Bao was a beautiful creature, possessed of striking, large eyes. He was heterochromatic, one eye was a piercing blue, while the other was a peculiar, pale rose pink.
That pink eye was extraordinary, emitting a mesmerizing, almost hypnotic glow.
It had always been Tan Cam's favorite feature of his. But now, that beautiful color had transformed into the centerpiece of a living nightmare.
In the glassy depths of that pink pupil, she saw Thi Thi's reflection.
But the horror was that there wasn't just one figure.
There were two.
Another entity was perched directly upon Thi Thi's shoulders, its head was resting right against hers, and its pale, spindly hands were clamped firmly onto Thi Thi's shoulders. It was the shadow of a woman with long, matted hair. Heart hammering against her ribs, Tan Cam snapped her head up to look at Thi Thi. She saw only her friend, sitting upright on the sofa, tiredly rubbing her eyes. There was no one else there.
Trembling, she looked back down into the pink eye of Hac Bao. And the two figures were still there.
Terror seized her throat, making it impossible to draw breath. Her limbs turned to stone, and her mind went blank with primal fear. All she could do was clutch Hac Bao tighter to her chest, her knuckles white.
The reflection in the cat's eye grew agonizingly clear. Thi Thi leaned forward, peering down at Hac Bao.
Tan Cam didn't dare look at the real Thi Thi anymore. She kept her gaze locked onto the cat's eye, her body shaking like a leaf. It was unmistakable. Duong Thi Thi was carrying a woman with long, lank hair on her back. Dark, viscous blood was dripping from the woman's pale, translucent arms, though her face remained obscured by the shadows of her own hair. Those long, black strands fell over Thi Thi's face, some even appearing to poke directly into Thi Thi's eyes. Drenched in a cold sweat, Tan Cam remained frozen as the woman riding Thi Thi's back began to move. Slowly, agonizingly, the specter raised its hand, extending its middle and index fingers into a claw-like gesture, the unmistakable motion of gouging out eyes. As if possessed by some malevolent force, Thi Thi began to mutter deliriously, "This cat's eyes? They are so strange. I just want to dig them out. I want to see what's inside them." Without Tan Cam even noticing, Thi Thi's hand had closed around the fruit knife lying on the coffee table. Tan Cam felt the strength drain from her limbs. Suddenly, Hac Bao hissed and launched himself through the air, lunging straight at Thi Thi. Startled, she lurched to the side to avoid the feline's claws. Hac Bao retreated, leaping back into the safety of Tan Cam's protective embrace. Tan Cam looked at Thi Thi with wide, terrified eyes, struggling to force her voice into a semblance of calm. It's getting late now, and I just remembered I have some urgent business to attend to.
I should go.
I'll head home first. Thi Thi did not try to stop her. Her face was deathly pale, a mask of sallow skin as she replied.
That was truly bizarre just now. Why on earth did I have such a gruesome, intrusive thought about gouging out the cat's eyes? It seems I've truly gone insane. It was just so incredibly barbaric and cruel.
Thi Thi pulled herself up to a stiff, standing position, her hand trembling as she reached back to touch her spine, and she whispered with a shudder, I feel a deathly chill running down my back, and it feels so unnervingly heavy, as if an immense weight is crushing me.
Forget it, I'm going to the bathroom now.
Before Thi Thi disappeared into the restroom, she cast one final, lingering glance at Hac Bao. The cat, Hac Bao, stared back at her with an unblinking, predatory intensity that never wavered for a single second. Within the depths of its eerie, rose-pink eyes, a terrifying reflection appeared. A dark, spectral shadow was resting its ghastly head right on top of Thi Thi's head, its two phantom hands tightly coiled around her slender throat in a murderous embrace. Tan Cam suddenly jerked upright, her heart hammering against her ribs, no longer daring to look into the cat's unsettling eyes. She lifted her head to look at Thi Thi, who paused and turned her head back to say, I don't know why, but my eyes feel strangely itchy today, almost as if some tiny insect has flown deep inside. I feel this overwhelming urge to just take my eyeballs out so I can wash them clean. After uttering those chilling, nonsensical words, she let out a hollow, incomprehensible laugh and stepped into the bathroom, closing the world away. The moment Tan Cam saw the bathroom door lock shut, a wave of cold relief washed over her. She scooped up the cat and began to run out of the house as if the fires of hell were at her heels. As she swung the door open, she collided violently with the maid who was in the middle of carrying a tray of coffee. Not even bothering to stop or grab the cat carrier, she fled into the night, running with a desperate, life-or-death intensity. She ran like a madwoman, her breath coming in ragged gasps, completely oblivious to the traffic lights and ignoring the red and green signals alike. It wasn't until Hac Bao lashed out, delivering a sharp, agonizing scratch across her face, that she finally snapped back to her senses. Fresh, hot blood began to trickle down her cheek, looking for all the world like a singular, crimson tear shed in terror. If Hac Bao hadn't jolted her back to reality with that sting of pain, she would have been crushed by the oncoming traffic at that very moment. It was Hac Bao who had saved her life from the wheels of death. She stood there in the middle of the street, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. When she was a small child, her grandmother used to tell her countless strange and supernatural tales, so from a young age, she had always believed that the world contained many things that defied logic and reason. However, believing in stories is one thing, but witnessing the impossible with your own two eyes is an entirely different nightmare. Furthermore, at this very moment, her sixth sense was screaming at her that Thi Thi was in grave, mortal danger, and that she herself was destined to share that same horrific fate. She didn't dare go back to rescue Thi Thi because she was paralyzed by an all-consuming, primal fear. She had no strength left in her limbs to face whatever was in that house. The only thing she could manage to do was call Thi Thi's maid on her phone, frantically instructing her to stay alert and keep a constant, vigilant watch over her mistress. Clutching the cat, her life-saving benefactor, tightly to her chest, she hailed a taxi to head back home. Her mind raced back to the man of the 2-2 beat, that irritatingly arrogant and loathsome sorcerer who specialized in hunting demons and ghosts, Kaluong.